Ramsey High School. He's an 11th grader. Where are you, Dennis? Everything. So Dennis, nice and loud for us, buddy.
Hi, my name is Dannis Han, and I'm from Ramsey High School. And today I'm going to be talking about the expectations of law enforcement officers in America and the differences between federal, state, and local officers. So law enforcement officers hold a very unique position in the United States. They're usually either feared or revered, and the public opinion of law enforcement officers, in my opinion, is not similar to other professions. This opinion also varies from different levels of law enforcement, as the duties of federal, state, and local law enforcement vary. Today I'll explore society's expectations of law enforcement officers, whether or not that expectation is justified, and I will also explain the differences in federal, state, and local law enforcement officers. So the public's expectation for police has been a very relevant issue in recent years due to a recent uptick in large media coverage of police brutality. Most of this coverage has been involved with police shootings, typically a white police officer and a African-American man. These shootings were brought largely into light by the Black Lives Matter movement, and these shootings and the movement has changed public's perspective of law enforcement officers. Public opinion of police officers has experienced massive changes, largely in a negative manner. Today, people are more afraid of police officers, and distrust of law enforcement officers has grown in recent years, especially in urban communities. This distrust is more prevalent among minorities, as discrimination is often perceived in law enforcement. Minorities often report that they have been discriminated against by police. Distrust of police is not a new sentiment, but it has been quickly growing in recent years. This distrust and fear of law enforcement is a serious issue. A positive public opinion of law enforcement is essential. Having a positive opinion of lawfulness and legitimizing police in communities is incredibly important. Lawfulness means that police comply with constitutional, statutory, and professional norms. Legitimacy is linked to the public's belief about the police and its willingness to recognize police authority. Distrust of police has serious consequences. It undermines the legitimacy of the law and law enforcement, and without legitimacy, police lose their ability to perform their job and their ability to function effectively. However, researchers have found that race does not affect how people view police, even though minorities have a lower approval rating of law enforcement officers. It has more to do with the level of crime and education and socioeconomic status in communities and neighborhoods. Distrust with police officers is unique to law enforcement because it's not the same as a lawyer or a doctor, because law enforcement is very important. Well, law enforcement is essential to maintaining a safe community. Making trust in them is necessary. And without law enforcement, society would fall apart. So it's essential that we have trust in police officers. I think it's unfair to place the blame on the media for creating distrust. Media is a business, and knowing that you could be killed is a scary thought. I don't think it's really fair to place the blame on anybody. I think this is something that just happened. But this is a serious problem, and in order for this negative perception of law enforcement to change, their action needs to be taken. There are many ways that we could do this. The media, for one, could lend a helping hand. I think the media should be able to focus on the positives of law enforcement. The media actively trying to change public's perception would help bridge gaps between the police and their communities. It was also, I think, important for the police and their communities to create bridges and to have conversations and to have dialogue. Simply having discussions and humanizing police officers would be a great way to bridge the gap. I think programs like this, where you have communities interacting with law enforcement, is a really effective way and a really great way to be able to rebuild trust in communities and between communities and law enforcement. Now, moving on, there are multiple levels of law enforcement. There are 3 different levels of law enforcement: federal, state, and local law enforcement. The responsibilities and duties of these agencies vary depending on their levels. The federal government in the United States empowers a wide range of law enforcement agencies to maintain law and order and public order related to matters affecting the country as a whole. The responsibilities of federal law enforcement can vary from counterterrorism to finding counterfeit money or protecting national parks. Some examples of federal law enforcement agencies include the Federal Bureau of Investigation, United States Coast Guard, Department of Homeland Security, and much more. These federal agencies will have different responsibilities relating to the safety of the United States. Now, state law enforcement has different responsibilities. The state police often police laws within state jurisdiction. This includes policing state highways, statewide investigations, and sometimes state police will assist local law enforcement agencies with investigations and emergencies that expand beyond the resources and jurisdictional boundaries of the local agency. Local law enforcement agencies include municipal, county, and regional police that derive authority from the local governing body that created them. The primary purpose of these agencies is to uphold the laws of the jurisdiction, provide patrol, and investigate local crimes. Now, to conclude, the police is viewed with negativity and distrust in the United States today. Although not totally unjustified, it is a serious issue that needs to be addressed in order for law enforcement to do their job effectively. Thank you.
Okay, will there be any questions or comments from our audience? How about our special guests? Anything, any comments or suggestions? Or I'll tell you that law enforcement today is very challenging. I can tell you that probably 99.9% of the time, law enforcement does great things. And that small percentage of times where law enforcement doesn't do things the way it should be done. And that's the one you hear about, that's the one you read about, that's the one that becomes sensationalized. So I can tell you, out of all the interactions, the millions, and I'm saying millions of interactions that law enforcement has with members of the general public, just like tonight, you have law enforcement representatives here tonight, but you have many other interactions across the United States. All those interactions, many of them, if not close to all of them, are good interactions, and there are some bad ones. And obviously when those bad ones occur, all those 99.9% good things are kind of washed out, and all you remember is the bad thing. Like Rodney King back in LA, California, a long time ago, when you seen white cops just hitting an African-American truck driver with a nightstick, and what happened? We lost all years of good things that law enforcement were doing for one bad incident. So you brought up a great point, Dennis, but I can tell you today is very challenging for law enforcement. Years ago it was perhaps a little bit easier, but today you got social media, not only media, print media and TV media, but you got social media, you got cell phones. In our days when we were growing up, you couldn't go on your phone and text somebody or look you up on Google search or anything. You couldn't have that. You'd have to wait for it to come out in print media, in the newspaper, or on TV. So today it's a lot harder for law enforcement because there are a lot of expectations. But Dennis, you did a great job. All your parents here tonight? Can they be recognized? Mr. and Mrs.? We appreciate you doing a great job with Dennis. Congratulations. Dennis, congratulations. Okay, our next